We're good start, I got the nod. Hey, fantastic. Right, so yeah, very good afternoon to a very wet and windy Edinburgh. I'm sorry about the weather, I did order some nice. I'm PJ, that's me, smiling and waving on the screen there. Who am I? I work at SentinelOne, I'm a senior sales engineer. I've been with the company almost 2 years now. And I've been working in pre-sales for about 10 years. But before that, I used to work in information security. I worked for a really small energy company that gave lots of British people gas, naming no names. And I was there as information security, doing technical security for about 7 years. I specialised in forensics and other bits. And I used to work for a consultancy firm. So I've got a bit of a broad experience working from the industry and also working with customers. I understand where the pain points and challenges are. Today, the presentation I'm going to do is a short 1 or 2, 3, maybe 4 slides. Okay, a little bit about the product, a little bit of that, but then I'm going to go into a demonstration environment. And this is where everybody sits forward on the chairs praying it's going to fail. I'm going to do a live demonstration today. I'm going to detonate ransomware in a network, not this network. I'll tell you where it's going to be in a minute. So you're all right on the Wi-Fi for now, okay? I'm going to detonate some ransomware. I'm going to show you how we can protect and recover from that potentially using SentinelOne. So let's get onto it. So who are we? What do we do? Well, some of you may have heard of SentinelOne. Some of you are saying, who are they? And you might have seen us on the side of an Aston Martin at Formula One race. Now, yes, we're one of those vendors that sponsors Formula One as well. But fundamentally, we're a company, we're post-IPO, we're the fastest growing tech company in security now. We look at security on the endpoint. So we are looking for zero-day attacks on the endpoint. So we have a single agent that sits on the endpoint that is not dependent on sitting and connecting to the cloud and getting all this telemetry and all this analytics. It works independently on the endpoint. We stop attacks, okay? That is the #1 goal. But we're not signature dependent, okay? So we see a lot of vendors out there, traditional AV, have to have a signature. So we have to know what's out there already to stop and prevent it. What we're doing is looking at behaviors on the endpoint, not user behaviors, but what are processes doing? Are they spawning new processes? Are they trying to propagate around the network, etc.? So that is what we're doing, okay? Coin a phrase, next gen AV, there you go. That's kind of where we sit and where we fit on that space. When you talk on endpoint, we look at identities. So remember Active Directory, that wonderful single point of failure place that a lot of people have. You know, look at the Uber breach and, you see how credentials were kind of compromised through social engineering. They got a domain account and that's it. They went in there, they were able to disable some security tools and everything. And that brought me onto a really salient point because I did a demonstration to a customer once. I said, oh yeah, we do single sign-on with AD and all that. And I said, why would I want to put my security tools in an environment that if compromised, they get access to security tools as well? And I thought, well, hey, he's got a good point here. And I think that's part of a thought leadership, a thought-provoking idea is it a good idea to have all your security tools having single sign-on? Should you have independent logins and controlling around these security tools? And that just made things think a bit. We sit and work with the cloud. So we look at cloud native application security, vulnerability management on the endpoint. We touch on that, we assess things, and we provide MDR service, management, detect and response. That's enough about us, right? So I do want to talk to you about a pattern that we do have, and that's called storylines, okay? Now, storylines is a set of stories. So basically, imagine we are hooked into every process that sits on the endpoint. And as soon as an endpoint spins up a process, we're going to see that line start to span out and it's going to communicate. So as each time we have a detonation, we're looking at a snapshot and recording that storyline. And from that point there, if an attack occurs at that point there, it will then start to propagate and spread out your network. I love this animation, it's good fun, isn't it? Okay, so we know now that patient 0 started on this machine here and he started spreading out across the network. Okay, and that's typically how your attacks start. It could have come in at this point, it was dormant at this stage, we got to there. And what storylines is it records all that telemetry. And I'm going to show you that in a demonstration today and how we can depend and look at that information. we can understand where the root cause of the analyst, where it came back from, and then ultimately we can then resolve and mitigate and roll back to the point prior to that infection starts. Now that's super important to point that out today, because when I do my demonstration, you will get to see we are going to have SentinelOne on the endpoint, but we're going to run it in a passive alert only mode. So we're going to allow the attack to happen, but I want to show you storylines in action there. So the next slide should say demonstration time. There you go, I'll put demonstration slide up. There you go, demonstration. There we go. So let's get into it. Come on. Let's close the slide and do that. Does that come up? And this is where we're dependent on technology doing its best. Did it come up now? There you go. Platform. Can you all see the screen okay? I'm conscious in the environment. We've got a small screen at the front, people at the back there. I've tried to zoom in as best I can, and I will try and stand and talk and present to you as well as we go through things. So what I'm looking at here is the resolution's not brilliant, but okay. So we've got on the left-hand side here 4 endpoints. You may recognize some of those names: the Borg, the Enterprise, the Melbourne, and Saratoga. Yes, they're all from the Star Trek franchise. Am I a Star Trek fan? I enjoy watching it. I won't say I'm a Trekkie or anything, but I enjoy watching it. These are 4 endpoints that are in a network, and it's a private isolated VLAN network at my home address, okay? And I have a VPN connection open to that VLAN. Nothing else sits on that VLAN, thank God. When I first set this up, my wife was working at home, my poor wife. My son was at home with his Windows laptop as well. And I'm thinking, if I get this wrong, I'll probably face divorce, won't I? Because she's going to have a laptop encrypted, her work laptop's encrypted, and everything's going to go wrong. So when I detonated this ransomware for the very first time, I was holding my breath. And I was hoping nothing was going to go really badly wrong. But thankfully, the VLAN, the rules, everything stayed as it was, and I was able to contain it. So our 4 endpoints. Now, what we have on those endpoints is a policy, what we refer to as a policy. Now, the purpose of this demonstration today, I've told SentinelOne on that endpoint to only detect the attack, okay? I don't want to protect it at this stage because I want to show you that if we were running in detect mode, the assurance of how we can recover and roll back using that storylines I talked about earlier. If I were to run this demonstration in protect, guess what? Nothing to see. You have an early lunch. Do you want to see that? No, no, you don't see that. So we're kill and quarantine at machine speed, and so everything goes, okay? We can also, at that same time, contain the device. We can disconnect it from the network, so we can isolate that device. So we still gain access to that from the management console, so if we think it's a false positive or something really bad has happened, we can reconnect that device. And we can also probe that device and pull back forensic artifacts. They're coming to get me. No, that's the ambulance. Probably will come and get me after lunch. So we're looking at how we could communicate with that endpoint if there is an infection on there. We can do remote control to the endpoint, open up remote shell, file fetch, run remote scripts, do what you need to do. But all the time that device is isolated on the network. You can even send a message to the end user saying, don't panic, I did this, or he did this, etc. So they get some reassurance that someone's looking into why they're disconnected from the network. So today we will be running this in detect mode, and it's going to be an alert only. I am going to have all my detection engines on, and these all natively run on the endpoint. So there's no dependency for the agent to be connected to the internet to get any signature updates or to go any analysis or anything like that. It's all about doing the analysis on the endpoint there. So we're looking at all the behaviors, the binary, what's happening. Is it trying to propagate around the network, etc. A few other things we can do on the endpoint is become the firewall. So get rid of Defender, we go over, and we are then the firewall on the endpoint. So we can set up rules on the endpoint to say, allow and deny certain applications in the environment, just as you would as a host-based firewall on the endpoint there. This is a really fun one, and we have a lot of users use this. It's device control. You see your USB drives and your Bluetooth and Bluetooth low energy devices all connected to your laptops and that. You want to make sure that people aren't taking data out of the environment, so you want to disable mass storage devices. Device control is exactly that. You can control who has what access to what device, okay? You can put exceptions in place saying, only allow this vendor ID or this particular piece of hardware, but that's exactly what device control is all about there. Let's run an attack. So let's go back to our endpoints here. Here's our 4 endpoints, and this is what it'll look like. Ooh. Yeah, I downloaded some graphics off the internet, got a bit busy. So resolution on TV is not brilliant, but we're there just about. Top left-hand corner is the Borg, okay? This is our domain control. It's a Windows Server 2016 box, and these are all Windows 10 machines. In fact, the Saratoga, this endpoint here, it's only a 32-bit operating system, and the reason I'm bringing that up now is when I detonate the attack in a minute, it's a little bit slow, okay? Always slow to a battle, that one. But the Enterprise and the Melbourne, they're going to be in sync with each other. And on the endpoint, for example, I can bring up some sensitive files. So in this folder here, we can see I've got all my sensitive documents like my CV and everything like that, and all the other bits and pieces in there. Happy as Larry, nothing is going wrong at this moment in time. Until I introduce Lockbit 2.0. So what is Lockbit? So it's been in the news recently because I think part of Lockbit and the people who authored Lockbit have been taken down and arrested, and recovery keys have been brought back out. And now there's a decryption tool out there to help people who have been infiltrated by Lockbit. However, unfortunately, that code was made public on the underground. So you can go out there and generate your own Lockbit generation codes and encryption codes. So unfortunately, it does mean Lockbit's still prevalent, and there's version 3 and even version 4 of it out now. We're going to run version 2 of it today, okay? And it's only because it's the one I had access to at the time to do it. I put it as an executable on this endpoint at the moment called resistance is futile. Okay, bear with me on this one. Now, when I detonate this, it's going to launch. Now, we're allowing it to launch. Remember, SentinelOne's installed on the endpoint here, but we're in a passive mode, so it's going to alert. So you're going to see lots of alerts coming up on the screen saying, oh, something's not right here. Do you know you're allowing this to happen? Yes, yes, I know. You're going to see a window come up, and what Lockbit does is it consumes and attacks the domain controller first. And rather than using network-aware protocols to share it around the network, it uses group policy. Why wouldn't it? You know, it's a great tool to use. So group policy will then launch, and all the other machines will have a GP update ran on their endpoints automatically because the domain controller told them to do it, and then the ransomware gets spread around. Let's do it. So let's not click on that. Oh yeah, let's click on that. Oops. Okay. So yes, it does have a graphical user interface. Now I did this at an event once, and I had some people come up to me and they said, I never want to see this screen again. Hit us badly. You know, and I thought, I'm sorry, you know, take a seat, you're on a beer, you know. And then I showed them how we recovered, and they said, no, I do need a whiskey now, you know. So has a log, tells you what it's doing. Isn't it nice of them to do that, you know? This is as real as it's getting, okay? What you are seeing here is a real live ransomware attack on the endpoint. You saw some alerts come up on the endpoint there. There's group policy kicking off now, and all of a sudden, all the other machines following suit. Why not? You know, oh, okay, we're running away. I told you, Saratoga's always slow. Where we get that? Now it's got that, it's now detecting the threat on the endpoint. So what's going on here? This has created a payload and it's spread around the network. Now you can see why I was very nervous about facing divorce after 20 years, right? What if my wife said, what's this screen saying I'm being encrypted? Come up on a machine. So we were able to contain this, okay? Have a look on this endpoint here. We've got our files here. In a second, you'll see they're going to get, oh, look, restore my files.txt. I wonder what's in that information there. It's probably where I have to go and put my bitcoins. Okay? It's going to get all those files encrypted. There you go, Lockbit file extension. Everything's been gone now, so lost all that. Lockbit's incredibly fast. Why is it fast? It's fast because it only needs to encrypt the very first part of the file. That's it. Done. It doesn't need to do a whole lot, so it's super fast. So eventually, everything gets owned, game over. We're in a really, really bad and sorry state. Okay, this is where I wish no one to have this situation. And I do apologize if you've been victims of ransomware. This might be bringing back bad memories. When I used to work for that said energy company, we had a very small outbreak of ransomware. Small as in we had about 10 endpoints. We were able to contain it quickly, but it was horrible because when they encrypt the files, you don't know what those files were. They generally rename the files, so you don't know what the files were, and that's the challenge, And so you ask the end users crying and sobbing away and said, what work did you have on this? I don't know. I'm just a project manager, and they have no idea what's going on there. And I said, don't worry, they're there. By the way, HR want to have a word with you. Why? I don't know. There you go. So, game over. Or is it? So SentinelOne, we got our endpoints. We know we got some impacts and threats going on at the endpoint at the moment. So let's have a look at our incidents. So number one thing is, if you're a SOC analyst, this is amazing, okay? 2 alerts for 4 endpoints, loads of attacks going on, but we're only giving you 2 alerts, not pages and pages of alerts. You think, oh my God, what's happened here? We're summarizing and grouping it all together. 2 alerts. And we can drill down into those alerts and take a closer look to see what's going on. So we look right at the bottom there, we can see our executable. Resistance is futile, So let's see if I can zoom in a little bit better down there. There we go. Can we see that? There it is down there. And we can see it hit the Borg, and that's where it started. It went on to Borg, it hit the Melbourne, the Enterprise, and then eventually the Saratoga. Did warn you, it's a slow one. And what we can then do is drill down and take a closer look at the data and the details in that attack. So we're now giving you information about the threat file name. We're giving you some signatures that's gone on there, give you some classifications. We're mapping it all back to MITRE. Familiar with MITRE attack framework? Nodding heads, yeah, everyone knows about MITRE. It's a brilliant framework. You're starting to bring out stuff for AI now, which is great. Some of you may have been to one of my sessions where I've done a whole talk track about thought leadership around AI, which is another story in itself. But we look at the threat indicators on the right here, and we take a closer look, and we see, well, it's got a persistence mechanism here. It's put itself as an auto run. It's behaving like ransomware. It's deleting the volume shadow copies. That's interesting. Why is it deleting the volume shadow copies? Well, first of all, what are volume shadow copies? So volume shadow copies is a service provided by Microsoft. Okay, it's where they take snapshots of all your files on the endpoint and store it into a system volume information. So if you ever opened up your C drive and see a hidden folder in there called system volume information and wonder why it's taking up all that disk space, that are snapshots. Those are backups. Okay, and Microsoft are backing up your snapshots probably every 2 to 4 hours or so, and it's on a cycle, and they replace those files. Okay, now you may not even know that's enabled in your environment, and some group policies will say no, we don't need it, because what's the point of having volume shadow copies if the attacker is the very first thing they're going to go and do is delete them. SentinelOne will protect volume shadow copy services. It's another patent that we own. We hook into that service, so if there is an attack going on, we hook in and say, hang on a minute, you shouldn't be deleting these files, so we won't let you delete it. However, I will send a success message back to the attack process and say, well done, you got me, deleted, okay? And then if the attacker is watching that and have a watchdog service watching, and they think, oh, payday's coming soon, okay? Because we sent a success message saying, yeah, you got me, okay? Keep that in mind, because that is why we can recover and roll back, because we're going to look at volume shadow copies. Let's take a closer look at that attack and explore the attack, the storyline, okay, of what happened. So on the endpoint, we had this executable called 967.2 Might have said that 1 or 2 times, okay? And then it spawned another event called command.exe. Let's have a look what command.exe did. Well, we can see here, if I can try and zoom in around there. Over here, the command line, VSS admin delete shadows. So this is the actual anatomy of the attack itself broken down, and we're showing you what the attacker's doing. He's executing commands on the endpoint to try and delete all those volume shadow copies, getting rid of them right from the outset. Nasty man, hey? Let's see if I can zoom back out again. If it's ever going to let me do that. Okay, we got that. So going back to our threats and everything like that, let's drill back into my enterprise. We've got our indicators, we've got some notes there, we've got some other information. We call it XDR. You might have heard the term XDR. What is it? Is another buzzword. For us, it's extended detect and respond. This is all about enrichment of information in the alert itself. So we can go out to other tools in your organization. We could perhaps go to Alien Labs, or we could go out to Netscope, or we can go out to Zscaler and pull more information from those and enrich the alert. So it can tell me, is this an admin user? Yes, it is. So we now know a little bit of information. The user that's been compromised on the endpoint is now an administrator. If we look a little bit further down, we can see that we got Okta kicking in. And we got Okta summary here that Jean-Luc is the user on the endpoint. Of course it is. You know, everyone knows Jean-Luc. Earl Grey Black. Failed logins, IP address 103.54, etc. Source IP address is Russia. Hang on a minute, Jean-Luc's not based in Russia, nor does he do anything in Russia. So why have we got 14 counts of IP addresses coming in from Russia? So this is enabling the analyst to do more with the information. We're enriching that. Now for me, I now know Jean-Luc's an issue for me. Okay, he's been compromised. He could potentially be logging into other systems and infecting those systems. So I need to take an immediate action against Jean-Luc. Now, typically in a SOC team, and I've managed a SOC team in my previous years, is that you'll have another team that will manage Active Directory or Okta or anything like that. You raise an emergency change request to get that change done. All takes time, okay? It might be you have to open up another console. My point here is that we integrate into those. So I can take a response action and I can select Okta and I say, look, I'm going to say suspend the user account. I'll clear any user sessions at the moment, and for giggles, I'm going to force a password reset because I'm that kind of guy. Okay, I'm going to click apply there, and instantly we're making API calls to Okta now to instruct that action. So we're taking action within the alert itself. Let's recover. So let's go back to our two alerts we got there on the endpoint. Let's just remind ourselves what our endpoints look like. Pretty messy. I'm going to now take a mitigation action. Now, normally this would be something we'll be automatically doing. Remember that right from the beginning, okay? I can kill that process. I can certainly quarantine that process. Remediate will undo any changes that a threat has done on the endpoint. So if it's created a new spawner file, other registry keys and other bits and pieces, remediate. But finally, we've got an option to then roll back. And rollback will then restore any files that's been impacted and recover the system back to the way it was. I'm a good analyst. I'm going to say this is resolved, and I know it's a true positive. I click apply, and let's go back to our endpoint and watch the fun happen. SentinelOne has sent out the instruction to the agent saying, recover, please. And you need to roll back to the point and time and the impact of the infection. So it's doing that. You see the alerts coming up. You'll see these files in a few seconds get restored because we're pulling back for the volume shadow copy. Oh, we've got our graphic back. That's nice. We can see these files, that file there, restore my files.txt, that's going to get deleted because that wasn't there in the original place. There it goes. And now it's going to recover those files as we see it going on there. 2 endpoints out of 4. This will be the last one. You know it is. You know why. But it's there for a reason, just to demonstrate that that one's always slow. 32 bits should be always 64. We've got this endpoint back now, so that's pretty much there. And finally, we're going to get the Saratoga back as well. The whole point here is that we restored everything back to prior to that attack. The only difference is, on this endpoint, you don't see resistance is futile. That was patient 0. We killed and quarantined that threat. Okay, so we got rid of it and we wiped it off the face of the planet. So everything's getting back to there. There's a few tidy ups going on behind the scenes here, but for all intents and purposes, how long did that take? Less than a minute? We got everything back. Okay, and it doesn't matter if you've got 4 endpoints or 4,000. That's how fast it's going to be because the instructions are done on the endpoints. It's not done from a central location. We're instructing endpoints to recover. So let's take a look at our results now. Oh, green ticks. I like green shields. That's very cool. Let's drill down and have a look. Let's take a look at the enterprise again on that one. Some useful information at the top there. Mitigation actions killed 54 processes. It's good. How long did that take? Oh, it took 100 milliseconds. That's the difference of a Formula 1 car and P1 and P2, isn't it? Good grief. Quarantined, one file successfully in 100 milliseconds, remediated, one still pending at the moment, but we've got the rollback here of 2,875 files and registry keys recovered from the back end. And the key thing here, it took 17 seconds. You can download the report and have a look, see what files were impacted. The point here is those endpoints are good to go again, okay? Would I trust them? Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've still got protection on the endpoint there. I probably might go and schedule rebuild. I'm old school security, you know. I'll probably rebuild those endpoints at some point. But the point here is we've got your back. Now, why have I showed you a demo that allowed the attack to happen? Well, just remind ourselves what we did here. The policy was set to detect. By default, we would recommend you protect. Now, if I did that now, that whole attack is eliminated and stopped. In fact, it's so fast that when I detonate resistance is futile, it's deleted and quarantined the file before it's even loaded in memory, and it comes back with a Windows error, invalid binary. So fast. But suspicious threats are anything that starts to look like a threat and attack. And it could be a few false positives going on there. And if something nasty does slip through, we're detecting it. Don't forget, we've got your backs, okay? The assurance piece is that we can recover. I'm not going to stand up here and say that we're a vendor that will protect you 100% against every attack. That would be very remiss of me saying that, okay? There's always going to be someone smarter and better out there bringing out new techniques. But if they are, we're ready for them and we can recover, okay? So that is what I wanted to show you today, is ransomware doesn't have to be keep me awake at night thoughts. If you have something like this on the endpoint, you have that assurance and protection, the fact that we will protect any zero-day attacks on the endpoint. Also, if anything does happen, we can help you recover. And that is 3 minutes to lunch. Not bad going, I guess, in some ways. I would take any questions. Anyone's got any questions? Yeah, please, sir. Thank you.
A really simple one. So malicious threats, is that from quick simple question. Malicious threats, is that basically from signatures, whereas the suspicious threats is your 0 days, or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the question's around about malicious threats. If it's malicious threats, is it based on signature technology? So one of the engines we got here is called reputation data. That is signatures, okay, and that is synchronized on the endpoint every few minutes or so, and with data changes. We'd be remiss if we didn't look at signatures and that, but we are not dependent on it. So malicious threats, well, yeah, maybe from reputation, but specifically if we didn't have that engine running or we didn't have any updated signatures, all this will run and determine whether it's malicious or not, okay? All these engines here will look at the behaviors, understand, saying, whoa, hang on a minute, and it does it super fast in machine speed too. It's not like it's taking minutes or 2 minutes to work it out. Oh, yeah, it's a threat or attack. Let's go and do something about it. It's done it at machine speed and determine the behavior of that file, what it's doing there, is malicious. We'll do it. So no, it's not dependent on signatures, is the short answer. But great question, thank you. Any other questions? Jordan?
Yeah, a real quick one. Basically, you said at the beginning about how it's an agent that sits on the endpoint and like watches stuff. And you mentioned that it's able to detect 0 days and 0 day exploitation. Is that based on the behavior?
Yeah, yeah, it is. So the agent sits on the endpoint. It's not cloud dependent. So there are other vendors in this space that will have an agent on the endpoint, but some of their engines, they need to send some telemetry and data to the cloud to do some analysis and send it back. In the industry, it's known as a delay, okay? And delays in cybersecurity and in threats like this is unacceptable. You shouldn't have minutes of delays. So all these engines run natively on the endpoint. So we are looking at behaviors on the endpoint. Those 0 day attacks, we're looking at behaviors. I always use the analogy of when my colleague goes on holiday for 3 weeks and he's not connected to the internet and someone gives him a threat on a USB stick and he plugs it in, it's a 0 day attack, he's protected because the engines on the endpoint have detected that threat and say, hang on a minute, this is what he's trying to do. This is a known behavior of an attacker. We'll stop and quarantine that machine straight away. So he has no visibility to the internet. When he does get visibility on the internet, we get told, hey, did you know Lewis's machine was impacted by that endpoint there? So yeah.
Just to follow on from that, like 0 days are successful because no one knows how they work, right? And
right.
So how do you detect something you know nothing about?
No, it's a fair point. So we are updating, so we got research and dedicated research teams looking at all the trends and the vectors of how attacks start. And we provide updates, live updates, if you like, to the behavior engines. They don't have to change that often. You're right, we don't know about how they're working, but there are common trends and threads that an attacker will take. And we map that back to the MITRE attack framework. So if you look at MITRE, it's got hundreds and hundreds of different techniques. And so we map, I think, about 80% of those techniques into SentinelOne. We've got a very good mapping on that. So although it might not 100% identify that is a malicious threat because it's a new technique, there'll be enough of that technique there from a legacy perspective to know that is a real threat, and we'll stop it. To date, we've been in business for about 12 years. We've never had a customer compromised in that state, so that's a good thing for us, a very good statement to make because we never had anyone being caught out with it. But I'm never going to say never, there's always going to be that chance that something is going to get through. But this is the whole point of today's session, is if something does get through, we can recover storylines, and that's a pattern we own. That is something is unique to us. So I showed you that fancy graph at the beginning, how we can get back to that point there. It's there as an assurance, not as a tool, okay? It's an assurance thing. And I don't know many customers have had to roll back, but it's there if they need it. Thank you. Any other questions? We're upstairs, you want to come and find us. We might have some swag left on the screen, on the stand there, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Enjoy lunch.